Hey, my name is Cal Merritt. I'm 31 years old, and I stock shelves at the Heron Lake Grocery Distribution Center just outside Millhaven, Indiana. A town small enough that you know which gas station has the good coffee and which one has been under new management for 6 years without actually changing. I've been at the warehouse for 9 years. I started this summer after my father's medical bills cleared, and I needed something steady, and steady is what it turned out to be. I manage the receiving floor now, which means I sign for deliveries, check inventory against manifests, track what's short and what's overstocked, and make sure everything that comes off a truck ends up in the right place at the right time. People outside the industry don't think about it much. The shelves at the grocery store just look full, which means someone did their job. I'm one of those someones. The work is quiet, and the way heavy work is quiet. Your hands are always doing something, but your mind has space to wander. I've moved thousands of cases of canned peaches. I've inspected pallets of cereal boxes at 2 in the morning and pallets of flour at 5. I know how weight distributes, how stacking works, how the wrong angle on a hand truck can send 300 pounds of orange juice concentrate sliding across a concrete floor. I know when a shipment is underpacked by the way it shifts. I know when a box has been damaged in transit before I open it, just from the way it sits. You develop a feel for what's stable and what isn't. You learn what's likely to fall. My day looks like this. I'm up at 4:15, dressed by 4:30, at the warehouse by 5. I check the previous night's intake, review the morning manifests, walk the floor once before the first crew arrives. I work until 2, sometimes 3. I stop at the diner on Route 9 on the way home, not every day, just when the food in my refrigerator has gotten to the point where I'm making calculations about what can still be eaten. I get home, shower, sometimes watch an hour of TV, sometimes don't. I sleep by 9:30, 10 at the latest. Repeat. I don't say this like I'm complaining about it. I'm not. It's a real life. It pays for the house I rent on Lacey Street, keeps the truck running, puts something into a savings account every month. I'm not restless in some dramatic way. It occurs to me sometimes. In the evenings when the house gets very quiet, I've gotten very good at being alone. So good that I occasionally forget it wasn't always the plan. There was a woman named Sarah 3 years ago. We were together for 2 years, which was the longest relationship I'd had, and she left in the way that good people leave when they've been patient for a long time and finally run out of patience. She didn't yell. She sat across from me at the kitchen table one Thursday night in March and said, "Cal, I don't think you actually want someone. I think you want someone to be nearby while you do the things you were going to do anyway." I didn't argue. It was accurate. I sat with that for a long time after she was gone, sat with it until I'd turned it over enough times that I understood it wasn't cruelty. It was a fair assessment. After that, I stopped dating. Not in a dramatic, wounded way. I just stopped trying. The way you stop reaching for something that keeps turning out to be further away than it looks. That's the life I was living last October, on a Tuesday afternoon, when I pulled into the Millhaven Value Mart after my shift to pick up coffee, eggs, and something that wasn't a frozen meal. It was cold, the kind of cold where the sky goes that flat pewter color and everything smells like rain that hasn't arrived yet. I was tired. I just wanted to get what I came for and go home. The parking lot was half empty, which was what I liked about going on a Tuesday afternoon. No weekend crowd, no cart traffic jams, nobody standing in the middle of an aisle reading the back of a soup can for 3 full minutes. I had a basket instead of a cart. I was going to be in and out in 12 minutes. I was crossing from my truck toward the entrance when I heard it. Not a crash exactly, more of a sustained sliding tumble, the kind of sound you know before you process it. I turned toward it. She was standing at the back of a small silver car, and the trunk was open, and what had been a full paper grocery bag was now 3 separate sections of a paper grocery bag and a spread of canned goods, produce, a box of pasta, a container of yogurt, and 2 oranges rolling with real purpose toward the drain at the edge of the lot. Her hair was dark and pulled back loosely, and pieces of it had come forward around her face in the wind. She was wearing a tan coat that was a size too large, and she stood very still for one moment, looking at the food on the ground the way you look at something when you're already having a bad day, and this is just the most recent proof. I almost kept walking. My brain ran the calculation. Not my business. She'll handle it. Strangers don't generally want interference in small disasters. I had my 12-minute plan. I was tired. But she bent down to reach for the yogurt, and one of the oranges caught a downward slope and rolled another 3 feet. And she looked at it, and she didn't move for just a second, and something in the stillness of that 1 second made me change direction. I got to the orange before it reached the drain. I picked up the pasta. I caught the second orange on its way under the car. I came up with both of them, and she was crouching at the edge of the spill, gathering cans into the crook of her arm, and she looked up at me when I crouched down across from her. She had dark eyes, very direct, slightly guarded in the way of someone who has gotten used to people meaning well and then needing something in return. A small cut on her lower lip, almost healed. Her hands were quick and efficient, picking things up in a practiced way, not flustered. "You don't have to," she said, not unkindly, just factual. "I know," I said. We picked up everything. I stood up with the 2 oranges and the pasta, and she stood with the cans, and we put it all in her trunk, and she found a reusable bag folded underneath the spare tire and transferred everything into it, and this time the bag held. She closed the trunk and turned around and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite classify, like she was deciding whether to say something or not. "No one has ever done that for me," she said. "Not a stranger. Just picked things up without being asked." She paused. "That probably sounds strange." "No," I said. She almost smiled. "Okay." She looked down at the 2 oranges still in my hand, and I realized I was still holding them. She held out her hand. I gave them to her. "Thank you, Cal," she said, and then stopped and said, "I read your name tag." I'd forgotten I still had my warehouse badge clipped to my jacket. I looked down at it. "Right, I'm Dara." "Cal," I said, unnecessarily. She almost smiled again. It got a little further this time, closer to a real one, and she said, "I know." She lifted the bag. "I should get these inside before I manage to drop them again." "You'll be fine," I said. "Put the cans on the bottom. Weight in the middle, light stuff on top." She looked at me. "Is that advice? It's just how stacking works." She considered this. "Okay," she said, and went inside. I stood in the parking lot for a moment in the cold, and then I went inside too, because I still needed coffee and eggs. I didn't see her again for 8 days. I wasn't looking. I wasn't thinking about it. But the Value Mart was the only real grocery store in Millhaven that wasn't 40 minutes away. And it was a Tuesday again, and she was in the produce section, looking at the apples the way I look at inventory manifests, systematically, checking each one, rejecting the ones with soft spots. She saw me before I saw her. She said, "You're back." "I live here," I said. "So do I," she said. "I just moved here 6 weeks ago." I said, "From where?" She said, "Columbus," and went back to the apples. "Then, do you always give people advice about bag packing?" "Only when it's relevant." "It was relevant," she said. "The bag held this time." She held up an apple. "Does this look okay to you?" "I can't tell." I looked at it, put it back. She put it back. She found one that was fine. She put it in her basket and moved on to the pears. I noticed, without meaning to, that she walked with a very slight hesitation on her left side. Not a limp exactly, just a quarter-second delay, like the leg remembers something the rest of her has moved past. I didn't ask about it. I picked up the things I came for. At the checkout, we ended up in adjacent lanes. She looked at my basket and said, "Coffee and eggs and frozen soup." I was going to get real food, I said. And then I didn't. She paid for her things, and I paid for mine, and we walked out into the parking lot together without discussing it. She said, "Do you work at the warehouse on Route 7? The distribution center?" "Yeah, I drove past it." She opened her trunk, this time with a reusable bag already out and positioned. She put the cans in first, weight in the middle, light stuff on top. She glanced at me, and I didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say. She asked, "What do you actually do there?" I told her. She listened in the way some people listen, which is with actual attention rather than just waiting for their turn to speak. "So you know when something's going to fall," she said, when I'd explained the feel for weight thing, "before it does." "Usually," she closed her trunk. "That must be useful," she said, in a tone that suggested she was thinking about something other than the warehouse. She lifted her bag. "Thank you again. For the other week. You don't have to keep thanking me." "I know," she said, with the same flat certainty she'd said it the first time. She smiled, this time a full one, brief and real, and then she got in her car. I sat in my truck for a moment before starting it, thinking about nothing in particular. About how some people listen with actual attention, about the slight hesitation in her walk that she carried so matter-of-factly, like she'd simply decided it was part of her, and that was that. About the way she put the cans in first without being told twice. I drove home. I heated up the frozen soup. The house was quiet. The third time was not the Value Mart. It was the diner on Route 9 on a Thursday evening in early November, and she was sitting alone in a corner booth with a cup of coffee and a notebook open in front of her, and she was not writing in it. She was looking out the window at the parking lot with the expression of someone doing difficult mental arithmetic. She noticed me at the counter and lifted a hand, not a wave exactly, more of an acknowledgement. I ordered my coffee and my usual, and I stood at the counter for a moment. And then I did something I don't usually do. I said to the waitress, "I'm going to sit in a booth," and I walked over and said, "Is this okay?" Dara looked at me, and then at the seat across from her. "Yes," she said, in a way that suggested she meant it. I sat down. She closed the notebook. On the cover she'd written what looked like a list of costs, and I didn't look closely enough to read it, but I saw enough to understand she'd been doing the difficult kind of arithmetic. "New job?" I asked. She looked at me. "How did you know?" "You looked like you were calculating whether something was possible." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm trying to open something," she said. "A small business. I've been working out the numbers for 2 months. "What kind?" "Meal prep. I cook for people who don't have time or can't cook for themselves. Elderly clients, mostly, some families." She said it plainly, like she was stating a fact about someone else. "I did it in Columbus. I had 12 clients. I had to leave Columbus." She paused, and the pause had weight in it, the kind of weight you don't explain. "So I'm starting over." "Starting over from 12 is different from starting from 0, I said. She looked at me. "Yes," she said, like this was the first useful thing anyone had said to her in a while. "The distribution center orders through 3 suppliers," I said. "One of them does commercial kitchen equipment. If you need contacts, I can find out who handles the small business accounts." She was quiet. "Why would you do that?" I thought about it. "Because it's a useful thing to know, and I happen to know it," I said. And because 12 clients means you already know how to do this. She looked at me for a long moment with those direct dark eyes, and I had the particular feeling of being seen, not in a comfortable way, more in the way of something being examined that doesn't usually get examined. Then she said, "Okay. Okay." She opened the notebook again. "Tell me what you know about commercial kitchen suppliers." I told her. She took notes. My food came. She ordered a piece of apple pie when the waitress came back around, and she ate it with the businesslike efficiency of someone who had been sitting over coffee for 2 hours and had finally decided to also eat something. We talked through her cost structure. She knew the basics, but she was undercharging for transport time, and I told her so, and she frowned at the notebook, and then agreed. She had a number in her head for what she needed to make it work in the first 6 months. I told her it was achievable, but she needed to plan for the months 2 and 3 to be lean, not month 1. She listened. She wrote things down. She was competent in a way that made the competence invisible. She didn't perform it. She just used it. At some point, the diner had gotten quieter around us, and I looked up, and it was nearly 8 o'clock, and we had been sitting there for almost 2 hours. She looked at her notebook, and then at me and said, "I've been monopolizing your evening." "I don't have a monopolizable evening," I said. "This is the most interesting Thursday I've had since, I can't tell you when." She looked at me with that evaluating expression, and then she said, "Me too," and closed the notebook. "I should go. I have a client tasting in the morning." She stood up, pulling her too large coat on. "Thank you for the contacts and for the cost structure conversation. You're good at this. It's just logistics," I said. "Most people don't understand logistics," she said. She picked up her check. "Are you here every Thursday?" "Most Thursdays." "Okay," she said. That same flat certainty. And she went. I sat with the last of my coffee, and I looked at the empty booth across from me, at the slight indent where her notebook had been, and I thought about the quiet in my house and how the quiet was going to feel particular tonight, in a way it hadn't for a long time. It became Thursdays, not formally. We never arranged it exactly, but I was at the diner on the Thursday after, and she was there, and we sat across from each other and talked. And then the Thursday after that, and eventually the waitress, whose name was Bev, started bringing Dara a coffee when she saw me come in, which was her form of official recognition. We talked about her business, which was slowly taking shape. She had 2 clients by the 3rd Thursday, 4 by the 5th. She talked about the cooking the way I talked about the warehouse floor, practically, specifically, without romance. She knew what temperatures killed bacteria and what temperatures changed texture. She knew which of her elderly clients needed soft food and which ones needed higher sodium, and which ones would throw away anything with visible vegetables and needed the vegetables hidden. She cooked around people's actual lives rather than their ideal ones, and I thought that was a skill, though I didn't say so. She told me pieces of Columbus in return for pieces of my work. Not all of it. There was a shape to what she left out, a careful perimeter around something I didn't press. I knew she'd had a partner there. I knew the business hadn't been the reason she left. I knew she'd left quickly, 6 weeks in Millhaven, after what sounded like a fast departure from a place she'd built over 5 years. I knew this because of the way she talked about the clients she'd left behind. She missed them with a grief that she reported factually, the way you report factual things when the grief is not one you've had time to process. I told her about Sarah, in the same way, not the full story, just the shape of it. The kitchen table. The fair assessment. She listened. She wasn't wrong, I said. Maybe not about that version of you, she said. I didn't have a response to that. I looked at my coffee. She said, I had someone tell me something accurate about myself once. It took me 2 years to stop being angry at them for it and start doing something about it. What did they say? That I was better at taking care of other people's needs than asking for my own. She said it evenly. I thought it was a criticism. It turned out to be a description. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. I'm still working on the asking part. I said, me too. She looked at me and then looked back at her cup, and something in the air between us settled slightly, the way it settles when two people have said something true to each other at the same time. The 3rd week of November she called me, which was the first time she'd called rather than texted, and her voice was a register lower than usual, which I recognized by then as her holding something steady. She said she had a problem. Her commercial refrigerator, a second-hand unit she'd bought through one of the contacts I'd given her, had died overnight. She had 2 client orders for the next morning. She needed somewhere cold to store the prepared food for 12 hours. I said, my garage. I have a chest freezer and a standard refrigerator out there. The refrigerator's been running empty for 2 years. Silence then. You've had an empty refrigerator running in your garage for 2 years. It was my father's, I said. It runs fine. I just don't use it. Another silence, different from the first. Thank you, she said. I'll pay you for the electricity. You won't, I said. She didn't argue. She came over at 7 with 2 large insulated carriers, and we transferred everything into the garage refrigerator. And she stood in the garage looking at the shelves of carefully labeled containers, the ones with the client names and the heating instructions written in her precise handwriting, and I saw the concentration in her face, the going through it, time, temperature, order of delivery, what needed reheating and what could be served cold. You can walk through it if it helps, I said. She looked at me. What? Talking through a logistics problem. Sometimes it's easier to organize it out loud. She blinked. Then she talked through it. I listened, asked 2 questions, and she figured out the order herself. By the end, she had a clear sequence, and she was calmer. She stood in my garage at 7:30 in the evening and looked around at the shelving units and the old refrigerator and the hand truck that had been my father's, and she said, "You keep this very organized." "Everything has a place," I said. "If everything has a place, you always know what's missing." She was quiet for a moment. Then, I never had that. Growing up, everything was always in the wrong place. She said it like a small observation rather than a wound, but it was a wound, I knew by the flatness of the tone. "I've spent a lot of time since trying to put things in the right place," I said. "I think you're good at it." She turned and looked at me directly, the way she did when she was deciding whether something was true. "Not always," she said. I stayed in a situation in Columbus too long because I convinced myself I was being patient when I was actually just afraid to leave something that was familiar, even if it was wrong. I kept putting that in the right place, and it didn't go. The garage was quiet. Somewhere on the street a car passed. She had her arms crossed loosely over her chest, not closed off, just cold, because my garage wasn't heated, and she was looking at a point somewhere between us. "It's hard to leave something you built," I said. "Yes," she said. "It is." She exhaled. "He wasn't a bad person. He was just, I think he needed someone who wanted less. And I kept trying to want less." She paused. I got very good at it for a while. I looked at her. She was looking at the labeled containers in the refrigerator. "I think wanting less is the wrong direction," I said. She turned her head and looked at me, and something in her face shifted. Not a lot, just a millimeter, the way a door shifts when you turn the handle before you've decided to open it. Then she said, "Me too," very quietly, and the quiet garage held it. I put my hand over hers where it rested on the refrigerator door, just for a moment. I didn't say anything. She looked at our hands, and then she looked back at the containers. "I should let you get inside," she said. "It's cold." "I don't mind the cold," I said. She almost smiled. "I know," she said, "but I do." She picked up her empty carriers. "Thank you, Cal. I mean it." I watched her pull out of the driveway, and I stood in the garage for a while after, looking at the labels she'd written in her careful handwriting. Everything in the right place. The first week of December, her former partner showed up in Millhaven. I didn't know he was coming. She didn't tell me he might, which told me she hadn't expected it either, or that she had and hadn't known how to say it. His name was Drew, and I knew this because of a single voicemail from her on a Wednesday evening that said, "Drew is here." He came to the house. "I'm okay. Can you call me?" I called her. She picked up on the first ring. He'd driven from Columbus, a 3-hour drive on a Wednesday, for a reason she said she didn't entirely believe, which was that he wanted to talk. He'd said he wanted to understand why she'd left. She said she'd told him at the time, and he hadn't wanted to hear it. He'd said he deserved an explanation. She said he had received one. "He wants to come by again tomorrow," she said. "He says he just needs to talk." "What do you want?" I asked. "I want him to go home," she said. "I want it to have been enough that I left. Then that's what you tell him." "I know," she said. I get confused when he talks to me for too long. He's good at making me feel like I'm being unreasonable." A pause. "He's been very good at that for a long time." I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Can I be there when he comes by?" She was quiet too. "Then you don't have to do that." "I know," I said. She came to get her food from the garage the next evening, and Drew was already there, parked on the street, waiting, in a car that was clean and recent. And he got out when he saw her. He was tall, dressed carefully, with the ease of someone who has always been able to afford ease. He looked at me when I came out of the garage behind her, and he did the reading that men do. He cataloged me and made a decision about me quickly, which I could see in his face. Maintenance worker. Not relevant. "I just want to talk," he said to Dara, in the patient tone of someone explaining something to a person who is being unnecessarily complicated about it. "We talked," she said. "I drove 3 hours. I didn't ask you to," she said. And it was the first time I'd heard her voice go flat in that particular way, the way a surface goes flat when everything underneath it has stopped moving. "Dara," he said, with a weight on her name that was meant to be meaning. "I'm just trying to understand." I moved to stand beside her. Not in front, beside. I didn't say anything. He looked at me again, reassessing, and this time his assessment was slower. "She told you to leave," I said. Simple, flat, not loud. He looked at me with genuine surprise, like I'd spoken out of turn. "I'm sorry, who are you?" I waited. Dara said, "He's a friend." And he's right. She was looking at Drew with those direct, dark eyes, and there was no confusion in them now. The talking for too long effect had not had time to work. "Drew, I left because I was invisible in that apartment for the last 1.5 years, and every time I tried to say so, you found a way to explain why that was my misunderstanding. I'm not confused about what happened. I don't need to talk about it again. I need you to go home." He looked at her, and then at me, and then back at her. He started to say something about how she'd never really. "She asked you to leave," I said. The second time worked. He understood something about the second time that he hadn't understood about the first. He looked at Dara once more, with an expression that was trying to find an angle, and she waited with the patience of someone who has genuinely stopped negotiating. He went back to his car. He drove away. We stood on the driveway and listened to the car get quiet. "Thank you," she said after a while. "You did that," I said. She looked at me. "We did that," she said. And something in the word, the "we," sat between us with a weight I didn't examine yet, but I felt it. That night she didn't leave. We went inside because it was December and the cold had teeth, and she sat at my kitchen table and I made tea, which I almost never made, because she'd mentioned once that she drank tea in the evenings. I'd bought it 3 weeks ago without thinking about it very much. She wrapped both hands around the mug. She said, "I'm sorry I didn't warn you he might come. You didn't have to warn me." "I know," she said, "but I should have trusted you with it. I think I didn't tell you because telling you would have made it more real, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do about it yet." She looked at the mug. "That's the thing I'm still working on, the asking." I sat across from her. The kitchen was quiet and warm. She had her coat off, and her hair was down from where it had come loose during the driveway conversation, and she looked more like herself than she usually did. Less contained, less in order, more real. I said, "I have been carrying something around for about 6 weeks, and I don't know how to say it right. So I'm just going to say it wrong and hope that's okay." She looked at me. "I think about you," I said. "Not like a friend thinks about someone. More like, when I'm at work and I'm running inventory and everything is in the right place, I find myself thinking about what you'd think about the system. When I'm in the diner on a Thursday, I don't care about the diner. I've been buying tea for 3 weeks, and I don't drink tea." I stopped. Sarah was right about who I was then, but I don't think she was describing who I have to be. Dara was looking at me with her hands around the mug and the evaluating expression. The one I'd learned meant she was deciding whether something was true. "You're really slow, Cal," she said. "I know. I've been sitting across from you every Thursday for 2 months," she said. "I told you things in that garage I haven't told anyone since Columbus." She set the mug down. "I put things back where they belong now. That's what I do. And you've been where you belong in my week since the second Thursday." I said, "Okay, okay," she said. I reached across the table. She put her hand in mine, and it was warm from the mug. We sat there for a while in the quiet kitchen with the tea cooling between us. And I thought about the parking lot in October and the oranges and the woman who had stood very still in front of the small disaster and waited for it to stop being a disaster, and how I had almost kept walking. Then she leaned forward across the table and kissed me. It was slow and careful and tasted like tea, and it lasted longer than a first kiss usually lasts, which was exactly the right amount of time. When she pulled back, she said, "I'm going to figure out the commercial refrigerator situation. I don't want your garage to become a dependency." "I don't mind the dependency," I said. She considered it. "I'll give it 2 more weeks," she said. "Fair," I said. The commercial refrigerator got replaced in January, a better model, through a contact I found her. At a price she negotiated herself. Because she was better at negotiating than I was, and we both knew it. By February, she had 11 clients in Millhaven, which was 2 fewer than she'd had in Columbus, and she said this like it was a deficit until I pointed out that she'd reached 11 in 4 months, starting from 0, in a town a third the size. She wrote a number in her notebook and then circled it, and I understood the circle was her version of acknowledging that I was right. She moved into the house on Lacey Street with me in the spring. Not the house I was renting, but a different one. One we found together, that had a proper kitchen and a garage with room for both her equipment and my father's hand truck and refrigerator. She put her labeled containers on shelves in a system she designed, and I didn't touch it, except to say it looked right. Because it did. Bev at the diner gave us a look when we came in together the first Thursday after. And then she brought us both coffees without asking, and then she went back to the counter and said something to the cook. And I heard the cook laugh. Dara's business hit her 6-month target in month 5. She hired a part-time driver for the delivery route. She added 2 more clients and turned down a 3rd one because the timing didn't work and she was not going to extend herself past what she could do well. I had never watched someone know exactly how much they could carry without dropping it. Some evenings she cooks for us, not for clients, just for us. And she does it in the focused, efficient way she does everything. And I sit at the kitchen table and don't help because she prefers the kitchen to herself, and I've learned that about her. And I read or look at the week's inventory reports, and the house has the particular quality of a house where 2 people are each doing their own thing in the same room, and it is not silence. It is something else entirely. I used to think I was good at being alone. I understand now that what I was good at was going through the motions of a day and arriving at evening without having to account for it to anyone. That is not the same thing as being alone. That is just being careful not to need anything. Dara showed up in a parking lot in October, with her groceries on the ground and her hair coming loose, and her whole life in the process of being restarted from scratch. And she looked at the disaster in front of her with the stillness of someone deciding that the disaster was going to get cleaned up whether or not anyone helped. I almost didn't stop. The orange was already rolling toward the drain. Maybe what I know from 9 years of handling freight is this. You can learn to read weight. You can learn what's about to fall and what's more stable than it looks. You can learn the difference between something that needs to be caught and something that just needs to be put in the right place. Sometimes it's a box of canned goods. Sometimes it's something else entirely. The skill is the same. You pay attention. You don't walk past. You put your hands where they need to be, and you trust that the rest of it will hold.